Chapter 16. Shadow's Sexual Adventures. God, yes. A few weeks went by. More and more Shadow was living a life away from me. He no longer complained if I went out. Sometimes we went out the door together. Other times I came home to find him gone, but he was always home for dinner. As we ate, we would talk about our day, but what had happened while we were apart, just like your ordinary loving couple. From those conversations, I gathered that Shadow spent most of his time in the neighborhood on Clement Street or California, sitting at this coffee house or that, favoring the ones that let patrons plug a laptop into the electrical supply, and searching. As might be expected of a former cat, he was curious about everything. What was voting? Why did people talk to themselves while walking down the street? What was it like what was it like to fly in a plane? Why did some people live outdoors? Who is this Christ person all the signs referred to? And why couldn't we just get rid of a president if we disliked him so much? And quite naturally, eventually, he got curious about sex, as humans understand the term. Sometimes he came home with a question. Other times he wanted to try things out. I should explain that up until then, our mutual pleasuring had remained within the bounds of what cats found acceptable. Kissing has no equivalent in the cat world. Based on his limited experience, Shadow had decided that to kiss meant to place one's lips on another person's neck, just below the ear, and nibble a little. He seemed to like doing this, and we often included it in our daily routine. God damn the stamina. One night after dinner, the man of my dreams was still doing the dishes on a fairly regular basis. I was stretched out on the sofa in front of the fire, the lights low, Chopin on the CD player. I was in the pleasantest sort of semi-conscious state when, all of a sudden, the sofa was rocking, tipping, and I opened my eyes with a start. "Shadow," I said, when I saw what he was doing, "you can't lie on the back of the sofa any more. You're much too big. It will tip over." But wouldn't you know, just as I said those words, he managed some sort of balancing act that left me lying on the sofa and him extended just above me to the left. As a cat, Shadow's favorite spot in the evening had been the back of the sofa. Occasionally, he would extend a paw tentatively towards my soft tummy, as though it were as far away from him as the Grand Canyon's bottom from its rim. With great trepidation, he would first touch, and then ever so slowly descend into my stretched out lap, presenting his head between my bosoms to be scratched. I have to admit that the idea of this heavily revised Shadow picking up that habit put me in a bit of what Victorian novelists used to call a dither. I could feel my face flushing, my throat tightening, the skin of my torso preparing itself for his touch. Through barely open lids, I saw his hand reach out and touch my chest, then come to rest on the cushion beside me. Somehow, still maintaining his balance on the sofa, the man of my dreams lowered his face to mine until the tips of our noses were touching, and then lips brushed mine. I kissed him back. Of course, I had considerably more experience in kissing than he did, and I felt no reluctance about demonstrating some of my skills. Oh, I can't finish now. No. Okay. Finally, he took a breath, and when his lips returned, I felt the tip of his tongue moving between them into my mouth. Suddenly, I had this image of his pink cat's tongue sliding between his fangs to lick at his face after a meal. My By instinct, I tried to sit up, and that utterly destroyed the delicate balance he had achieved. In an instant we were both tumbling onto the floor, the sofa turning over on its side and looming over us. Shadow had taken the brunt of the fall. I was on top of him now, but it hadn't disturbed his concentration. He rolled me over on my back and bent his face toward mine. I put my hand against his lips. I don't know if I can do this, I said. Of course you can, he replied, pulling my hand away. We were doing it just now. I liked it. Yes, but you didn't tell me there were so many ways of kissing. We should try them all. Maybe, but I got a hand between us and pushed at his chest. It's just that it just didn't feel right. We did it wrong? Today at the coffee house, a man and a woman were demonstrating. I'm sure this is what they did, kissing with tongues. Yes, you certainly have the gist of it. Jizz. You didn't like it? Oh, I liked it well enough. Impatiently, he pulled back. I don't understand, he said. How can you say we did it correctly and you enjoyed it, but it didn't feel right? What could I say? It's a moral issue. People have ideas about things that are appropriate to do and things that aren't. For a minute, when you kissed me, I remembered how you were a cat. People don't kiss cats. It would be wrong. It would be impossible, he said. Cats' mouths aren't shaped for kissing. Cats have no lips. They have to settle for what tongues can do. People have both. Why not use them? As if to illustrate, he kissed my cheek, then licked the same spot. I'm Shadow, he said, but I'm not a cat anymore. I'm a man. I can kiss you. You can kiss me back. What's wrong about it? He kissed my lips, chaste as an altar boy, then licked them and nibbled at them, extending on the little lesson I had provided. Soon enough, I forgot that he had ever been a cat, and so we added French kissing to our repertoire of pleasuring acts. But Shadow wasn't through with his research. Only a day or two later, he came home late in the afternoon and found me reading in the living room. I have a question, he said. Sure. Female cats have several tits, he said, so that they can feed their babies. These tits are used for feeding only. Yes, I said, a little impatient with his biology lesson. Few human females have only two tits, and I'm told they have other uses, not just feeding. Is this true? Yes. I saw there might this might be leading where this might be leading and felt a distinct ambivalence. Men like to look at them, he said, and they suck on them too, as if they were still babies. But there's no milk. He made it sound so enticing. Breasts are what humans call an erogenous zone. It's a place where touch gives particularly intense pleasure. He made room for himself beside me on the sofa, stretching his long legs out against mine. Then he put one arm around my shoulder and the other touching my breast. I could do this, he said. I could give you this pleasure. I had lately begun to notice that Shadow never asked permission. Instead, he always used declarative sentences with no question marks visible. That is so good to know now that we are more than halfway through with this book. God damn. Thought it was just shitty, shitty editing. Which it technically still is. As in, I could eat now, or we could go to bed now. I don't know, I said. You don't want it? He was already rubbing my breasts, as he often did in our usual pleasuring. So of course I'd begun to want it very much. Usually some things come before, I said. What things? Kissing and touching, I said, feeling a bit testy. Women don't just pull up their sweater and the guy starts sucking. There's a little romance to it. Not if you know what you're doing. Romance was a word I had defined for Shadow quite some time ago, so he seemed to understand immediately. He did some of the things that usually come before, and before I knew it, I was pulling off my sweater, and Shadow's head was bending low, and oh my. I'm not disparaging the kind of pleasuring we've done before, but this was so directly sexual that my body responded without any direction from my brain. My legs opened and circled around Shadow's hips, my pelvis raised to meet him. My hands reached for a part of him that had previously been off limits. In an instant he was on his feet. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "You know that this is forbidden." "To cats," I said, "not to men." So that means that they have not actually had sex yet. Is that what I'm getting out of this? Then why was it being so weird with verbiage earlier? God damn. He shook his head. "This is not something I want to do." I smiled, still under the sway of passion. "Well, I think part of you does." He covered himself. "We will not do this thing you call fucking." Okay. I sat up. "I see you've learned some new words. I don't especially like that one. It's a coarse word for an act that can really be quite lovely and wonderful." "Not to me," he said. "It's for making kittens. That's all." "Well, you might try it. You're driving me crazy with all this other stuff. I feel like a teenage boy who goes out with a technical virgin." There's no such thing as a technical virgin. Oh my god. If there is such a thing these days. "You caress and kiss and fondle and hug and nibble and suck. You make me want you more fiercely than I've ever wanted any man, but you won't satisfy the hunger you create. You're a big tease." "I give you pleasure," he said. "Sometimes you cry out with it." And it was true. It was even true that sometimes I experienced a climax no less pleasurable for the slowness of its rise and fall. But other things were true as well. "Yes, you give me pleasure," I said, "but I long for the rest of it, for the intensity, the passion." As I said the words, I realized that the thought had been lying there all along. "I don't know how long I can go on like this." "What do you mean?" "Being with you and not being with you. I don't see why I always have to live by your rules. You might try living by my rules for a change." "He does live by your rules because he's not eating cat food anymore. And he's dressed." I just. His voice was low. "I told you long ago, it will never happen between us. Only with women who are in heat." And his expression grew cunning. "There are women I meet, you know," he said. "Women who are in heat. I pass them on the street. I sit next to them. Sometimes I talk with them. But I obey the rule of men. I do not offer myself." How self-sacrificing. Yesterday, one of these women asked where I lived. She wanted to come home with me, but I explained that you might not like that. She said she'd be happy to take me home with her whenever I liked. He spun around and vanished into the hall. When I caught up with him, he had a jacket over his arm as he turned down the stairs. "Then go home with her," I said. "See how long she puts up with this routine. Have a good time." The door slammed behind him. I grabbed my jacket, thinking I would walk off the rest of my unsatisfied arousal that filled my body. When I got to the street, he was nowhere in sight. I walked 5 minutes around the park until the sun went down. When I returned home, it was well past dinner time. He wasn't home. The evening passed and he didn't return. At 10 p.m., I went downstairs and out of habit threw the bolt and fastened the chain. Then I went to bed. I did not cry.